June 6, 1944, D-Day, a day in history that will never be forgotten. A day that began with the liberation of France and the defeat of Hitler's army.
That was the most terrifying day in my life. I was never so frightened, expecting to get a German bullet in me.
Paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were the first men in.
I knew one thing about joining the Airborne. You are going to fight.
Through the dark and stormy skies, through the constant bombardment of artillery, and through the unforgiving waves of machine gun fire, the men fought back, unwilling to surrender. On June 6, 1984, 40 years after that fateful day, Ronald Wilson Reagan became the first U.S. sitting president to speak at the D-Day ceremonies in Normandy, France. The words from his two speeches that day would prove to be some of the most awe-inspiring words President Reagan had ever spoken.
For 4 long years, much of Europe had been under a terrible shadow. Free nations had fallen. Jews cried out in the camps. Millions cried out for liberation. Europe was enslaved and the world prayed for its rescue. Here in Normandy, the rescue began. Here, the Allies stood and fought against tyranny in a giant undertaking unparalleled in human history.
I went through the beaches. It made me sick to the stomach to see how many of our men were slaughtered out there.
As I lay on the ground, I remember I heard one guy kind of yelling, and he came down, plow into the ground.
Why would the Normandy invasion mean so much to my father? The answer is simple. President Reagan had an eternal bond of gratitude he felt towards those men who fought when he could not. As the son of a Midwestern American shoe salesman, young Dutch Reagan went to college and went on to become a sports announcer. His persuasive voice, charm, and distinctive look soon caught the attention of Hollywood. And in 1937, he moved to California and signed a movie contract with Warner Brothers Studios.
How do you do, everybody? I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ronald Reagan. A few months ago, I was a sports announcer on a radio station in Des Moines, Iowa. One day, I ran into one of these movie talent scouts. I think I caught him off guard because the next thing I knew, I was taking a screen test for Warner Brothers in Hollywood.
By 1939, as Hitler was tightening his grip on Europe, Reagan had already appeared in 19 movies. His career in Hollywood was off and running, and by the time the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, the future U.S. president was one of the most popular young stars on the screen.
Here's our chance to log every inch of that channel right into the Sea of Japan.
My father had enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserves in 1937, just as his Hollywood acting career was taking off. He was more than willing to put stardom aside. He believed in the moral duty to serve in uniform for the cause of freedom. There was one catch. He would never be ordered into combat. Why? He was extremely nearsighted. In April 1942, Reagan was called up from reserve to active duty. His poor eyesight having disqualified him for combat service, he put his talents to use in the 18th Army Air Force Base Unit, also known as the 1st Motion Picture Unit.
This is the Army Air Force's 1st Motion Picture Unit in Culver City, California. Here are produced training, operational, and inspirational films which graphically illustrate what we're fighting for, what we're fighting against, and what we're fighting with.
During the war, my father appeared in several military training films, and although he never jumped from an airplane, he appeared in training films to show young paratroopers how to prepare for the airborne assaults they would make.
We all felt that he was one of us, and the fact that he had served in Hollywood and made those war films, that gave us an indication that he was actually one of us.
In early 1944, Captain Ronald Reagan was sent to New York City, where he was assigned to work with other American actors and celebrities to raise much-needed funds for the war effort. Then came D-Day.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade. toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
We knew what we had to do. We put all our equipment under the belly of the plane. Lieutenant Coyle had us tested about 10 times, and they had to push it to the plane because we had over 180 pounds of stuff on our shoulder.
This was the first time our division headquarters had ever jumped with equipment, so we were really green. How we managed to survive is beyond me.
Flying from England to Normandy, them planes were rocking every which way.
The airplanes were going so fast that when the parachutes opened, the leg bags just ripped off.
I was with E Company. They were fighters. If they were told to do this, they did it.
In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world.
We got the job done, and that's what it's all about. And we didn't do it alone. We had to have help.
During his time with the 1st Motion Pictures Unit, my father encountered a great deal of uncensored war footage, including one particular film that never left his conscience or his possession. He kept it in a special place to forever remind him and future generations what it means when freedom is lost. The lessons and meaning of World War II were etched in my father's soul. As his career evolved from film and television to politics and leadership, he never forgot D-Day.
The martyrs of history were not fools, and our honored dead who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay, there is a point beyond which they must not advance.
As I said, President Reagan dedicated his life to the cause of liberty. And I think that nobody was more qualified than President Reagan to make such a speech in 1984.
40 summers have passed since the battle that you fought here. You were young the day you took these cliffs. Some of you were hardly more than boys with the deepest joys of life before you. Yet you risked everything here. These are the boys of Puente Hope. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. These are the heroes who helped end a war.
No matter how we chop it up, they are our heroes, the guys under the White Cross.
It was a very heartful speech. President Reagan spoke with his heart, and he used very beautiful words about courage and about faith of these men who died in Normandy.
The men of Normandy had faith that what they were doing was right, faith that they fought for all humanity, faith that a just God would grant them mercy on this beachhead or on the next. It was the deep knowledge, and pray God we have not lost it, that there is a profound moral difference between the use of force for liberation and the use of force for conquest.
After the Germans captured St. Marie Église, them people suffered because they were under the Germans for 4.5 years.
The gratitude of the French people must be extremely big, because without the American help, victory against the Nazis was not possible.
When I was there, of course, we couldn't understand what they were saying, but they would come up and hug us and kiss us, and they'd be crying, and I'd start crying. It was the same for us.
Our alliance, forged in the crucible of war, tempered and shaped by the realities of the post-war world, has succeeded. In Europe, the threat has been contained. The peace has been kept.
The message was loud and clear, and it was meant to be heard on the other side of the Iron Curtain, where individual freedom had been extinguished since the end of World War II. His life's mission began to shift. He would devote himself to the pursuit of freedom around the globe, no matter the cost.
Behind me stands a wall that encircles the free sectors of this city, part of a vast system of barriers that divides the entire continent of Europe. Today I say, as long as this gate is closed, as long as this scar of a wall is permitted to stand, it is not the German question alone that remains open, but the question of freedom for all mankind. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
We fought for freedom in Europe, and Ronald Reagan completed it. God bless him.
In 1986, President Reagan bestowed the Presidential Medal of Freedom on General Matthew Ridgway, whose career included the highest offices of the U.S. military.
When a soldier rising sword in hand reaches to protect an idea, freedom, liberty, human kindness, the world is for a moment hushed. Greatness is often born in quiet and stillness. And so it was that night in June of 1944, when General Matthew B. Ridgway prayed the words God spoke to Joshua, "I will not fail thee nor forsake thee." D-Day saved a continent, and so a world, and Ridgway helped save D-Day.
But it was not his role as a strategist or commander that the president applauded when awarding the medal. It was Ridgway's involvement as a soldier, who jumped into Normandy with his men of the 82nd Airborne Division and led them to victory. At the end of his presidency, when Ronald Reagan reflected on his accomplishments and the end of the Cold War, he realized the inspiration behind it all was the D-Day invasion of Normandy.
Once you begin a great movement, there's no telling where it'll end. We meant to change a nation, and instead, we changed a world.
In his final words from the Oval Office, President Ronald Reagan chose to reiterate the importance of the Normandy invasion and revealed why the free world should never forget.
You know, 4 years ago, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, I read a letter from a young woman writing to her late father, who had fought on Omaha Beach. Her name was Lisa Zanetta Henn, and she said, "We will always remember. We will never forget what the boys of Normandy did." Well, let's help her keep her word. If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are.
As history moves forward, we must never forget the brave men and women that paid the price for our freedom.
Through your stories and your eyes, I'll never forget what you went through, Dad, nor will I let anyone else forget. And Dad, I'll always be proud. Through the words of his loving daughter, who is here with us today, a D-Day veteran has shown us the meaning of this day far better than any president can. It is enough for us to say about Private Zanetta and all the men of honor and courage who fought beside him 4 decades ago, we will always remember. We will always be proud. We will always be prepared, so we may be always free.